This hour, we're talking about something that, at least for me, is a little bit complicated. The New Orleans-based Vera Institute of Justice wants some Orleans Parish inmates released. The experts say there's no reason to jail nonviolent inmates until or after they're convicted or until they go to trial. We tried to get anybody and everybody from the Vera Institute. We could not. We tried to get everybody mentioned in all of these articles on the Vera Institute size of this and could not get any spokespeople. So if you're out there and you say, well, we're just presenting one side of it, it's because the other side just would not come on. But we have Matt Dennis, who is a bondsman here in New Orleans, to tell their side of the story, because if you read the news accounts, they'll say the bail's bondsmen are protesting. Matt Dennis, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for having me.
What I want to do is go through some of these news reports that I've highlighted, and I want to read to you some of the things they say and then get your response. But before we get started, did I mischaracterize what Vera Institute says they want to do? They say they're people that are staying in jail because they don't have the money. They're nonviolent offenders. They should be released and not charge a lot of money to, and if you don't have the money, to stay in jail.
No,
is that incorrect?
No, that is their selling point. That is the discussion they use. Well, first of all, understand, I've been in the bail bonds business for 21 years. I'm a general agent. I don't just do bail. I give other people the ability to do bail. The bail bonds industry does not in any way want to see people that shouldn't be in jail stay there. A guy that is not a criminal, that doesn't commit crimes, our system has always had a form in place to let them out. Judges, pretrial release is not a name of a business. It's a position in a court case. It's getting out of jail before trial. Judges have at their disposal multiple forms of pretrial release. I'm one of them. Commercial bail is one of them. And we generally deal with more higher risk individuals. I mean, let's face it, everybody has two true assets in their life, and that's their word and their physical assets. When your word becomes no good, you have to put up something else. And when we're dealing with accused people of crime, you reach a certain level of inmate that needs to go through me. The other ones, the system tends to let go on its own. Guys that are in there for, criminal trespass, city charges, misdemeanors, and low-level offenses, they don't stay in jail. They get generally released on their own already. Vera claims that that's what they're after, those people. I would argue that we don't need to spend money on a system that is already doing it on its own, and what they actually do is go after clients that would probably swim in waters closer to mine. And where I have a problem with Vera is they have no responsibility in the end. When they give a referral to a judge, it's between the judge and the public and the press, because look at Akeem Scott. He was rated by Vera a 3 after an extended magazine. And
who is this?
Akeem Scott is the accused Mother's Day shooter.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
A month before the shooting, he was arrested on an extended magazine and an AK-47 with some heroin, resisting arrest. He had 7 charges total, I believe. And they rated him a 3, low risk, eligible to be released. Thankfully, Judge Hanson ignored that, and he set a bond. Of course, 30 days later, he gets arrested for the Mother's Day shooting. You would think that after you shoot 19 people, any program that the city institutes to, provide a risk assessment would consider him a 24, if 24 was the high mark. But their risk assessment rates Akeem Scott after shooting 19 people only a 7. In front of the city council on Friday, Vera Institute did a presentation, and in that presentation they said they took a snapshot of the jail on one day, and on that one day there was 500 plus people in jail that were rated between 0 and 6, and that they believe that those people should be released for free. Telly Hankton, I'm sure he's a notorious figure from New Orleans, he rates an 8.
Gang member, right?
Yeah, we're talking about a 2003 gun charge, a 2008 murder, a 2009 murder, and a 2012 triple attempted murder. And still, their rating system only rates Telly Hankton an 8. Ted Bundy, after the arrest, would rate a 3. So their argument to the city that anybody...
Why would Ted Bundy rate a 3?
Because the rating matrix doesn't allow for you or me or anybody else to look at the crime. It allows you, you can't be a 24 if you live in the same house for 6 months. If you go to school, continuously, and whether it be college or have a full-time job or regular high school, you can't be a 23. Their rating system, there's two things Vera claims. They claim to be able to somehow foresee the ability for a person to commit another crime, which is one thing the bail bonds industry never does. We don't pretend to be able to determine if a guy's going to commit a crime. The other thing they do is say that they can determine if a person's a risk for returning for court. But if you look at question 9 on their risk assessment, it scores failure to appears. And now that's what I do. I understand failure to appears. It's a big part of my business. But their rating matrix, from 0 to 2 failure to appears, you get no points. For 3 or more. So if you get 27 missed court dates, you only get 1 point out of 24. I don't know how that translates into being able to determine if a person is going to miss court. So I mean, the two main things that they claim to be able to do, which is guess whether or not a person's going to commit another crime or miss court, it doesn't show up anywhere in their paperwork. It doesn't show up in any way, shape, or form, because they only give you, when you look at the risk assessment, Akeem Scott, his primary charge was a felony, so he gets 1 point. There was no misdemeanors. He had a gun, so he gets an extra 2 points. It was an act of violence, so he gets an extra 2 points. He does have an open charge, so he gets another point. But nowhere else. He's never been convicted, so he has no probation or parole issues. When they risk assess you, if you're convicted of a past violent crime, you get an extra 2 points. But it doesn't allow for what if you're convicted of 3 past violent crimes. You still only get 2 points. The risk assessment is designed to keep people low risk.
New Orleans-based Vera Institute of Justice wants some New Orleans parish inmates released. The experts say, well, not the experts. I don't know if they're experts or not. They wouldn't come on the show. New Orleans Vera Institute of Justice said that there's no reason to jail non-violent criminals and make them pay to get out before they go to trial. We have the other side up here in the studio, and as I said in the beginning of the show, we're unable to get anybody involved with Vera or involved with the city council or anybody else to give us the other side. But Matt Dennis good enough to come in. He's a local bondsman. Matt, after your explanation, I think I understand the rating system a little bit better. Let me go to some of the reports where I've highlighted stuff I just want to get your response to. Let's see. It says Mayor Landrieu wants to add $100,000 to Vera's budget, and the budget's going to be around $584,000, and they say that saves us money. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Remember, Vera was hired to come into the city of New Orleans to provide a risk assessment, and the risk assessment is a grade, if you will, for a defendant that's accused of a crime. It's a 6-page survey that contains 12 questions. And those questions end up with a score of 0 to 24. I think when Mitch Landrieu, who I think has done a wonderful job, or the city council, or the judges, or anybody look at Vera, and you hear the story that they're talking about, poor people and low-level offenders shouldn't be in jail, I think we can all agree. But before we can determine if Vera is worth their money, is worth what we're spending, then we have to look at the risk assessments. You can't come to a meeting, say we're going to do risk assessments, pay us this much money, and then come back to the next meeting and say, okay, we finished a year's worth of work. The jail has 16% fewer people in jail. We saved you this much money because of that. We want more money. Well, who let those people out, and why are they out? If they were let out, if we did see a 16% or 20% reduction in jail population, and it was attributable to Vera, well, who did they let go? Until you do a cost-effectiveness analysis of their release versus who they released. There was a University of Texas in Dallas study done by Dr. Morris. It was asked to be done by the city, not the bail bonds business or anything like that. They had an existing pretrial services program, and the city wanted to know if it was effective. At the end of that survey, it showed that it was between 30 and 56% more likely that a person released through a non-supervisory type release like Vera, they weren't going to show up in court. Every failure to appear costs the city money. You have judges that are there, DAs, witnesses, police, you name it. So there's a dollar amount, and Dr. Morris figured it to be a little over $1,700 per failure to appear. So if Vera wants to bring numbers to the city and say, we saved you this much money, show us who you're releasing. Last year, Vera, there's a bill that's commonly called the Vera Bill. It's House Bill 367. Vera attempted to do three things in that bill. They wanted to remove, in our state, we have a series of crimes, very violent crimes, that cannot be released for free. Vera attempted to remove that block to allow judges to release a violent criminal for free. That contradicts what they say they're here for. The second thing they tried to do was become statewide. They wanted to be legislated to where every jurisdiction had no choice but to use their program. And then the one that's the most telling is the third thing they attempted to do, which was make the release of the risk assessments illegal. For some reason, they don't want these risk assessments out. And I think it's because the risk assessments tell the truth. You can't get around the fact that Telly Hankton is an 8, that Akeem Scott is a 7, that Ted Bundy is a 3. The risk, that's not how you assess a person's risk, not by some formula on a piece of paper that doesn't flex.
You told all this in the city council hearing?
Yes.
What was the response? What did the council say to you?
Well, last year I spoke about a problem with Philly. Philly is, they have a 40-year-old pretrial release system. It has completely destroyed their criminal justice system. And they're looking for ways, which after 40 years they've brought bail back. And this year I spoke about the risk assessments themselves. If the city wants to pay Vera, and I'm not against paying Vera, if they're doing the job, if they're everything they say they are, then show us who you let go. And that will tell us the complete story. If you're going to do an audit, you have to audit what you hired them to do. Okay? And I think that much of the city council, I mean, I hate to name names, but there's only one person really pushing Vera on the city, and it's Susan Guidry. The rest of the council persons all seem to be interested in hearing the truth. And I feel like in that hearing, Susan Guidry was carrying their water. She had made a claim that House Bill 297 passed, and it's not true. J.P. Morrell put in an amendment after
What's House Bill 297?
It has to do with different forms of release. And J.P. Morrell put in an amendment after the Mother's Day shooting because it was found out that Vera did not verify one thing Akeem Scott said. He made a bunch of lies that affected his rating. It made it lower. So we attempted, the state attempted, J.P. Morrell attempted to put in an amendment that required these groups to verify this information. Vera lobbied hard and got that amendment beat. Why? What are they afraid of?
But when you see all this to Susan Guidry, I'm listening very closely. It seems like a valid argument. She says in return.
She says in return.
Does she agree with what you're saying? Disagree? And if disagrees,
why?
She's
not. Look, we had in the hearing, another person was making a statement up there, and we were talking about exactly what I'm saying right now. And she came with this, well, they're pretty effective. Well, Vera brings to the table a 96% return rate to arraignments. Okay, I have a 96% return rate to arraignments, but because I'm attached to a dollar amount, if I get a guy out on a $10,000 bond and he skips court, I have to pay the court $10,000. So I don't care about arraignments. I care about motions hearings. I care about pre-trial, all the way to trial. What is your return rate at trial? So Susan Guidry did everything she could to shut us down so we couldn't talk. She would interrupt. She would try to correct what we were saying, even when we gave her the facts. So I don't know what the connection there is, and I'm not making any accusations, but the truth behind Vera is in the risk assessment.
The New Orleans Vera Institute, they said there's no reason to jail nonviolent inmates until they're either convicted, go to jail, or proven innocent. In other words, they shouldn't have to pay to get out of jail. We've tried everything to get everybody mentioned in all of the reports, including as many people as we could call from New Orleans-based Vera Institute of Justice, city councilman. So far, nobody came on the show, but Matt Dennis, a bondsman, is here with us. Matt, you know, I was just talking. This is my perception that must be horribly wrong. I was under the impression that marijuana was still illegal and people went to jail for it. But I've got friends of mine in law enforcement says, not true. Nobody ever goes to jail for marijuana, okay? Nobody in jail for marijuana. Now, the people that are in jail for nonviolent offenses can get out. They just sign a little document that says, if I don't show up for jail, for a hearing. I have to pay this, but they don't pay anything to get out. So what are these shows that I've done over the years of the lower educated, poor browns and blacks that populate our prison? Is it all violent people and everybody else on a signature gets out? I'm a little confused.
Okay, well, let me start first by saying, one thing's happened in the last few years. 21 years I've been sitting on Tulane doing this job, and I've never seen changes like what Leon Cannizzaro has brought. Leon Cannizzaro has done everything from changing the way bonds are set to changing the way misdemeanors are handled in court. One of the things he did as an example was he moved all misdemeanor marijuana charges from the criminal court docket to the municipal court docket. They are state misdemeanors. It freed up 50% of his docket space. It was huge when it came to moving people through the system. They've also went to a summons-based program for marijuana. I think most of the country is starting to kind of change the way they look at marijuana, and they're really looking at it for what I guess it is. They're really a low-level, non-offender type crime. So when you talk about low-risk, low-level, non-violent offenders in jail, keep in mind that you still have a group of people out there who may have a zero-risk charge that just refuse to finish their case or refuse to be responsible. The judge has
refuse to show up for court.
Yeah, they don't show up for court. They don't pay their fine, whatever it is. And at one point, the judge must do something to force that person's hand, or the judge has no authority. If you get into a system where there's no end game for a court case, then why even have a charge if you're not going to make the person finish the case? So you will find people that are in jail that refuse to take care of a simple charge that might be doing 10 or 20 or 30 days. You may find people, things like domestic violence. We're a reactionary society. When you have a very famous case happen, we tend to want to find out ways to stop it. So we pass laws, or we raise the penalty, or we make it harder. Mitch Landrieu, who I think has the absolute right intentions when he says gun charges should be set at $30,000. What if it's a low-risk, low-level person who just got caught up in a gun charge? We're not talking about he didn't shoot somebody. It's just a gun charge. Should it be $30,000? What if he can't afford it? I think that the judges are first of all, we elect them to make these decisions. They get a risk assessment in the courtroom when the district attorney's office provides information to the court. And then the public defender or the paid lawyer provides contradictory information to the court. Then the judge's job is to decide. What Vera is a third wheel. They're in there saying, this is what we think you should do, and they're independent of everybody else. And if they're wrong and the judge listens to them, nobody even knows they exist. The press, the people, they go after the judge, just like they did with Akeem Scott. They went after the judge, but they missed the core part of the discussion. Vera wanted Akeem Scott released for free with no supervision. You have to keep in mind, whoever Vera releases from jail, they're done. That's it. It's over at that point. They don't care what happens to this person. And if this person does pose a higher risk than others, who's going after this person? Who is going to spend the money to go get these people and force them back into the courts?
All right. Let's, if you will, let's pull in one of our callers here. Let's go to John. John, you're on with Matt Dennis.
Yes, good morning, Robin. Mr. Robinette, and to your guests, I like your show. I want to say that. I enjoy listening to it. And Mr. Dennis just hit on something that I was going to talk about, is who picks these guys up once this Vera Institute releases them? Does our overburdened police department get out there and use our resources to go pick these guys up that got out of jail for free? Let me tell you, I want to feel.
Well, hold on. Let's get an answer to your question, and I'll let you continue. Who picks them up?
Okay.
Absolutely. Under the Vera Institute program, if a person is released, it does. It falls back to our taxpayer-funded law enforcement systems, and that's really the bottom line. Again, from Philly, that's one of their big problems. They have 51 warrant squad agents that work 900 cases apiece. And that's always rotating. They never get lower than that. And that they spend $3 million a year just in that department alone. And that's fueled much of the desired change in Philly.
All right, John, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just want to say, let me tell you, if I have an issue, then it takes the police forever to get to my house. Well, now it's going to take them a little bit longer if they're picking these guys up. If they are looking for guys that got out of jail for free. Let me tell you, I don't feel comfortable with it. Not at all.
All right, John, look, I appreciate the call very much. I was under the impression that we had asked city council people to be on the show. Susan Guidry called in, city councilman, said she was not aware of being asked. So my apologies. If we did not ask her, then that's my mistake. What we're thinking about is the Vera Institute, New Orleans Vera Institute, and I know we called them and didn't send anybody on the show. What they're saying is experts, there's no reason to jail nonviolent inmates until they're convicted or they go to trial, and they ought to be able to get out without paying a ton of money. And one of the things that, we have a bondsman up here, Matt Dennis. Matt, one of the things I think I've learned from talking to you, I always assumed that somebody that was poor, they'd say, the judge set a $50,000 bond and they couldn't afford to bond out. And I just assumed that meant they didn't have $50,000, couldn't get hold of it. But are you telling me what that means is you got a signature that says if you don't show up for court, you pay $50,000?
The person who has a $50,000 bond would have a couple of choices. He can put $50,000 up with the court, right, complete his case, and get his $50,000 back, minus any court costs or fines or fees. Obviously, if the case was thrown out or dismissed, he would get it all back. Or they can put up a percentage with a bail bonds company. Louisiana's law requires it to be 13%. Plus, you have jail fees. So on a $50,000 bond, they're going to spend a little over $5,000. Again, remember, the bond was set by a judge, and I don't know if the judge weighed whether this guy was poor or not. I'm sure he weighed the severity of the crime, the history of the defendant, the things like that. The judge certainly doesn't want to release a guy who may come out and commit another crime.
Yeah, if I understood you correctly, Ken Azzaro, our district attorney, has done some rather extraordinary things to make the system fairer and to move better. Why do you think he is backing the Vera Institute on this?
I think everybody backs pre-trial release, which I am a part of. I think everybody backs a wide assortment of choices for the judge when it comes to pretrial release. He needs to be able to let people go for free. He needs to be able to let people go to their parents. He needs to be able to let people go to their pastors. He needs to be able to let people go on bond. The judge has to determine the level of risk that he sees and then determine the type of release. I don't think anybody questions the need for release of nonviolent, low-level. We don't want any of those people in jail, and I don't think one low-level nonviolent offender should be forced to use my services. I am here for the people that no longer have a good word. Their word is no longer acceptable. So I don't think anybody's supporting Vera so much as they're supporting the idea of pretrial services as a implemented program in our city. I think that anybody that speaks up for Vera has lost sight of the risk assessments. The job they're hired to do. They're hired to assess risk. So they need to show us who they assessed. Then if Leon Canizero supports them, then we would have something to talk about. But I think once they see 5,509 risk assessments that were done last year, I don't believe Jim Lenton or any of our city council or our mayor or anybody is going to support them. Because when you have a risk assessment on a accused Mother's Day shooter that after shooting 19 people only comes out of 7 out of 24, no sane individual would call that a good program.
So let me make sure I understand that. The rating system that Vera implements rates people from 0 to 24?
Correct. 0 being low to no risk.
So you're no risk at all, and 24 would be the worst of the worst.
Which you can't get to 24.
All right. And when you say to the law enforcement, city council people, or other people that ask you about this, okay, you take their system and you rate Ted Bundy, and he comes out, what, at 6?
A 3.
A 3.
A 3.
And that's based on why? Why would he be a 3 And why would anybody that hears that say that's a good system?
Well, because, the way it scores.
Give me an idea from
okay, the way it scores, it's easy. There's only 12 questions on their actual risk assessment. And for Ted Bundy, the first question is, was it a felony or not? And it was, so he gets a point. The second question is it a violent felony? So he gets 2 points for that. Does he have an open charge? Nope, he'd never been arrested. He's not under any supervision because he's never been arrested, never been on probation or parole because he's never been arrested, never had any misdemeanor convictions because he's never been arrested, no felony convictions because he's never been arrested, never been arrested on a prior violent crime because he's never been arrested. He has never missed court because he's never been arrested. He was a full-time employee. He had a job, so he doesn't get any points for that. He's lived in the same house for 6 months or longer, so he gets no points for that. And he's never been arrested, so he has no past drug convictions. So Ted Bundy gets 3 points.
And when you say that to the people that disagree with you, what response do you get?
Vera will not release the risk assessments. Vera attempted through a legislative act last year to make it illegal for people like me to get for people like you to get the risk assessments. So nobody sees the risk assessments.
So when you're in front of a city council, the DA, whoever, and you point out what you pointed to me, the system that gives Ted Bundy a 3, and why does this occur? And Vera won't even release the ratings themselves. What do they say to you? Because that seems like a pretty convincing argument that what they're doing is not a good argument.
Jackie Clarkston in the city council chambers made the comment that this is interesting to her and she wants to know more about it. Susan Guidry worked overtime to cover up the discussion and stop the discussion. The rest of them kind of just sat there and watched. But I get the feeling that they're hearing it and that they understand. I'm not asking to get rid of Vera. I'm not asking to not have a pretrial release program. We must have pretrial release for low-level, no-risk offenders. What I'm asking for, if we're going to pay them to do risk assessments, then audit the risk assessments. If you're going to cut them a check and say they're successful, it's based on risk assessments, not the fewer people in jail. I would suggest that we have a lower jail population because of Leon Cannizzaro, not because of the Vera Institute. So if we're going to pay Vera, let's pay them for what we hired them to do and audit what we hired them to do, audit the risk assessments.
All right, and I just found out that the reason we didn't contact Susan, get it retried, but we had old contact information. So, Susan, if you're listening, we didn't call the office. We apologize, Susan Guidry. We had old contact information. All right, Matt, thank you so much. I think I better understand the situation, and maybe one day we'll get the other side on, and then we'll try it again. So
I wish they'd have come.
Good. All right, WWL, Big 870 AM, 105.3 FM.